Do you know the things that are most important to Gen Zers? These are people born between 1997 and 2012. This week, we're going to learn about how we can better relate to Gen Zers and how we can help them in the workplace. Stay tuned. How do I bring my faith to work? How do I tap into the power of God in my work-life call? Why am I going through this adversity? Is God mad at me? I'm Oz Hillman, and I've been helping leaders like you answer these questions and more for over 30 years. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's learn and grow together. Welcome to TGIF, Today God is First. All right, well, welcome everybody to this week's TGIF at Work podcast. It's a delight to have a friend that just became my friend. Dax is a young guy that I met on the golf course, and brings back a lot of memories. He has aspirations for professional golf, has a golf scholarship to a university in North Carolina. And Dax, make sure that I'm pronouncing your last name right. Is it Isbell?
Yes, sir.
Is that the way you say it? All right,
Isbell, yes.
Isbell. All right, so Dax and I were having a conversation on a putting green recently, and he was telling me about some of the things he was doing and how passionate he is about the Lord and just, really wanting to impact his generation. And as I began talking to him, I said, what generation do they call you? And it's Gen Z. And that is people born or the age 13 to 28. And so Dax is right in the middle of there. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about how do we better reach that generation? What are the challenges that we have to reach that generation? Before we get started, I want to welcome all of you Change Agent Master Mentor members. If you're not a member of that, I encourage you to check it out at camastermentor.com. And so, Dax, before we get started, tell us a little bit about your own spiritual journey.
Yes, sir. I was very, very blessed to have some parents that know Jesus and love the Lord. And so they raised me to know about the Bible and about who Jesus is. And I think I genuinely came to faith when I was about 10 years old. And walking through high school, I think I trusted the Lord, but there was a significant turning point, I'd say, in college. And so when I went to college, I essentially looked at college as 4 years where I get decide the kind of man I want to be and move my life toward becoming that kind of man. And I wanted to be a man, quite frankly, that knows God's word and loves God's word. And so I just kind of made a decision that I'm going to read the Bible every day. And through meeting with him each and every day in his word, he's just really revealed who he is to me over the past 2.5 years. And so my faith has kind of taken off through my college journey. And uh, that's kind of where we're at now.
Awesome. And you have a younger brother, right, Cole? And you guys are both scratch golfers and have scholarships at the same school. What school again are you going to?
Yes, sir. We're going to go to UNC Greensboro in North Carolina.
UNC Greensboro. Okay, awesome. And your heart's desire is to get on the tour if that's the Lord's will. And both, I've seen both of you hit it, so you've certainly got the game. So we'll pray and agree with you that God's purposes will be accomplished in that as well. When you look at your generation, what are some things that come to mind for yourself when you are engaging with your generation?
Um, just kind of general trends of like how we operate day to day.
Well, that and some of the challenges you see that they have, and kind of where you see yourself being able to speak into their lives.
I think in general, my generation has access to information that really no generation before us has had access to. And
That's
so we can learn pretty much anything we want to learn instantaneously. We can find it for free. We can find it very quickly and then apply it very quickly, which is a good thing, but it also tends to be a little bit dangerous, just because we have so many different opinions kind of coming at us 24/7, really. And so sorting through what's true, what's good, what's bad, when we have access to all of these things becomes a real challenge. And I've seen that played out really in my own life, but in the lives of my peers as well. across the board.
Yeah, now with AI being introduced into our lives, I don't see how I don't see how teachers teach you guys now. I mean, just in preparing for our discussion, I just decided to ask Chat GTP what are the challenges that this generation has, and it spit it out in 10 seconds. High expectations of technology, desire for work life balance, frequent job changes. Why do you think that is? Frequent job changes? Is it just that they're just kind of learning to experience different things?
I think if I had to describe Gen Z in the workplace context in one word, I think versatility is the word that I would use, just because we can learn pretty much anything we want to learn. So we're going to be at least functional in 8 to 10 different skills that are marketable. And so um, I think there's two sides to that coin because a jack of all trades is a master of none sometimes. And so I think employers will a lot of times want somebody that can just stay in one lane and do one thing very, very well. And then you got a kid that knows 8 or 10 different things and is interested in 10 different things and he wants to kind of pursue some of those. So I think that's kind of the why behind the what there with the frequent job change. I think there's a desire to learn and grow as an individual across our generation. So that's what they're looking for. Um,
Yeah, I think even this first one that says high expectations for technology, Gen Z grew up with technology and expects seamless integration of digital tools in the workplace. Companies with outdated systems may struggle to meet their expectations. They are less tolerant of inefficiencies caused by poor tech infrastructure. We're seeing a little bit of that with the Doge, and Elon Musk team, where he's got all these Gen Zers probably that are sitting on those computers and dissecting this thing and finding all sorts of things. So it's a real benefit to have men and women that have that technology expertise and can use it in the right way. Um, Another thing that's listed on here is mental health awareness. Gen Z is more vocal about mental health challenges and expects workplaces to prioritize mental health well being. Employers may need to invest in resources like counseling, stress management programs, and mental health days. Do you see that in your circle?
I think um, I think mental health has become a very big deal in society as a whole, but especially in my generation. And I don't really want to get into like why the problems are caused because I think that can lead to some problems and maybe even foster a bit of a victim mentality. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I do think um, when people were forced to sit in isolation for a couple months due to COVID, they had to sit with their own thoughts and they didn't really like what they saw. And so a lot of people woke up and were like, wow, I really struggle with the things that I'm thinking day in and day out. And I have some problems I didn't know were there just because we had to sit still and we had to sit silent for so long. And I think that creates a really cool opportunity when we're sharing the gospel with people because now I think there's a new understanding of, man, we're really broken and we need somebody to help. Um, but I think the way that society has responded to that is how can we fix it ourselves? So how can we invest in mental health? How can we look at good work-life balance? What is a company doing to manage the mental health of its employees? And I don't think we can really effectively manage our own mental health without the gospel, really. And I think uh, our society is really trying hard to manage that, and I don't think we can do it by ourselves.
Do you see, obviously we've had a tremendous attack on the family in the last 20 years with a lot of divorce, a lot of dysfunction, sexual identity issues, all of that. Where do you see those symptoms or those root issues showing up in some of the symptoms of uh, those that you uh, rub shoulders with?
I think that's a great question. It's a little bit of a tough one to answer. I think um, with mental health and with family roles, kind of at least being exposed for their current state, and it's not really what we would love to see. Um, I think identity is the biggest thing that's attacked with people. And so I don't know. I think people that don't grow up in a family that's loving and supportive um, can start to look to, okay, well, what is society? And they can start comparing themselves to other people. And then their sense of who they are can get a little bit worn down. And I think that is maybe an indirect result of kind of the breakdown of the traditional family makeup. And so I think you have a lot of people that are very independent and they have big goals and big dreams, but um, they don't have a great understanding of who they are as people. And
Yeah,
I can really,
I
oh, go
find
ahead.
that among all people
Mhm.
that
Dr.
we
John
we
Pace.
don't have a most people don't have a understanding of their true identity in Christ. And when you don't have that, you look for all the wrong places to get that identity. And so often it ends up in a bad place. And that's why I really encourage people to understand their identity. And um, there's a guy that wrote a book, what's it called? Jamie Winship wrote a book called Living Fearless. And I just came across that book about 6 months ago, and I ended up doing an interview with him. And it's probably the best book on identity that I've ever read. I don't know if you've read that book, but once you understand your true identity, the world is your oyster. I mean, you can accomplish anything because you're walking in the power of the Holy Spirit in your life, and you're simply manifesting His power and presence in through your life. And so, encourage anybody to check that book out if you've not read that. And so, one of the last things they say on here about the challenges of Gen Z is a limited work experience. As the youngest generation in the workforce, they often have left professional experience, and employers may need to invest more in training and mentoring programs. How important is mentoring, in your opinion, for this generation?
I think there's a good chance we'll talk about it later in this call, but I think it's one of the more important things that my generation specifically needs. I think we need mentors that love us enough to tell us the truth and mentors that we trust over all the million different voices that are constantly speaking into our lives through our phones or whatever we're interacting with day to day. Um, I think in my experience, I've never worked a traditional job in corporate America. Like I don't have a work experience, but I do have a lot of life experience. And so I've done the college athlete thing. I've done a lot of ministry work. Like I have experience in different areas that aren't like I didn't get paid for. And so I think having mentors that can help me understand um, the significance of what I'm learning in those environments and then apply them to maybe a new environment, like a new job, taking what I'm good at and helping me understand how to apply it in a new area. Having mentors like that is important. And I think for Gen Z that's just now getting out of college and in the workforce, having mentors that believe in them and see uh, good attributes that they want to celebrate and foster, and then teaching them how to apply them specifically, like in a process-based way, day to day, is really, really important and powerful.
Yeah, in the scriptures, we see where God talks about us as sons and daughters versus orphans and slaves. And people who don't have a good father relationship and have not been fathered find it a struggle to really live like a son or a daughter, and they strive and they want to really focus on performance. And you and your brother have had a real a blessing to have a good father, and we've seen in society what's happened in the fatherless generation for those who've not benefited from that. And so it's really important that you have something that's very, very beneficial to you. And that ties into kind of the sexual identity challenges that are going on. Several years ago, someone told me about a couple of girls that were basically experimenting with same sex relationship, And one of the people that had actually worked in that area made an interesting statement. They said, for some of those girls, they're just experimenting. They are not gay, they're just experimenting, and it's cool. Do you see that kind of thing going on?
Personally, I haven't. Like I've never known anyone personally that's just experimenting in those realms. I've also been in generally conservative areas, just geographically, where I've grown up and then where I went to college. Um, but I do think Gen Z as a whole is searching for truth, but they're searching for like subjective truth. So what falls in line with their experiences and what feels good, what feels right in the moment. There's not a lot of like objective, this is what's true, this is what I can hold on to. And so they're kind of willing to try anything. And if it works, it'll stick.
Where do you see this generation spiritually?
I have a really, really close friend of mine who plays golf at UNC. He's very, very strong in his faith. I think in general, the percentages probably aren't great. It's a pretty dark picture. But he said something probably a couple months ago that really stuck out with me. And he was talking about his campus specifically, but I think it applies to our generation as a whole, just because the the group as a whole is so dark, the spots of light shine very, very bright. And so because there's so many like different options, I guess, that we've been presented with, if someone in my generation has looked at all the options and considered all the things that they could do with their life and say, you know what, I want Jesus more than I want anything in this world, they're going to be pretty passionate about their faith. They're going to be very effective in walking in the Spirit. But I think those people, if I had to put a guess on a number, it's probably 10% of people that are genuinely passionately following the Lord in my generation. Um, so I think overall it's pretty dark, but there are some bright spots that the Lord is really, really using to impact the world for His kingdom, and it's cool to see, uh, especially just with the wonderful friends He's given me and the circles I get to run in, people that love the Lord and are doing amazing things by His grace and for His glory.
And it's been encouraging to look at some of what's been happening on the campuses. I mean, we see the extreme left, with Hamas and all of that area that's been going on, that been on some of the Ivy League schools. But then we see other colleges where there's truly a spiritual revival taking place, and uh, you know, thousands of people coming to Christ. I just recently saw some things online that was very encouraging. When we look at their openness to Christianity, this research said there's a spiritual curiosity, but institutional skepticism. They're searching for authenticity. They have interest in justice and social impact. Their impact of media and secular culture is significant, and they're really big on personal connections. You see all that playing out.
I do. I took some notes when you sent me that little bit of research there. I think in general they are pretty resistant to the exclusive authority that Jesus claims when he says it's the way, the truth, and the life. That carries some offense, and it always has. Since 2,000 years ago, that's always been offensive to people. And they're bombarded with scientific data. Like the the educational system, especially in college, is making it a point to try to weed out Christianity from what I've seen. And I've taken some classes that directly, like, I took a geology class that he opened up and he was like, hey, we're going to talk about what's true. We're going to talk about facts. We're going to talk about beliefs. And he put Christianity in beliefs, and it was lower than what we can observe and what we can measure. Um, and I personally don't think that science actually contradicts with Christianity that much, as much as people are trying to make it look like it does. But that's all that my generation sees. Like everyone's trying to push that Christianity doesn't make sense scientifically, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Um, but I do think even with those two hesitations of my generation, they're desperate for real, authentic relationship because we grew up with kind of empty substitutes in social media, and so real, authentic human connection is extremely appealing to us. And so if they come across somebody who's very authentic in their faith and they can have a real relationship, they're going to be a lot more open. I'm obviously a college athlete. That's kind of my background. And so I see a lot of people that are really, really living for the world in those environments. But I've become close friends with a lot of people just because they see how authentic I am and that they're drawn to that. Even though we differ on some values, they're like, man, you got something I don't. And I'm curious about that. And so we begin to have a friendship, and then we can have some conversations about the gospel. And so I think uh, when I'm met with a lot of resistance, I don't want to say angle, but my number one angle is trying to help people understand how intentionally they're pursued by their creator from a relational standpoint, because that seems to resonate with my generation, I think, because I think it's something we lack in general.
We see a lot of polarization especially in politics, where, Democrats just basically want to shut you down instead of have a conversation. And whereas I think Republicans are often more willing to just at least have a dialogue without, throwing you out in with the bathwater. But in Gen Z, how open are most people to talk about things that maybe they know you might disagree with?
I think it really is kind of a cop out answer, but it depends. And I think it starts with a relationship. So if they trust your heart in having a conversation, they'll pretty much talk about anything. But if they feel judged or attacked, they're going to shut down. That's just so I think having relationship first and then authentic conversation is normally the way that people respond best in my experience. Um, like I've been around college athletes, have been on teams of college athletes that don't really know Christ. They don't really have a background in faith. I have to make sure that they understand I love them before I'm having any serious conversations. Because if I'm starting to have serious conversations, it's just going to go in one ear out the other, and we're not going to get anywhere.
Well, I applaud you in gaining that understanding this young in your life, because it's a very crucial principle to know. And about 10 years ago, it's been about 15 years ago now, we did a conference on campus of Harvard. And there was 10 of us who were speaking. And within a couple of days of being announced, all of a sudden, myself and other speakers started getting emails and calls about articles that had been appearing in the media about us that were totally false. It was a smear campaign.
Yeah.
What they were doing is trying to shut down the conference. And so they went to the dean to try to appeal to him, asking him, we don't want these bigots on our campus. And so, but we had a guy that was hosting the conference. He was like an Apostle Paul, and he could debate anybody. And he went to the dean and said, that's not true about them. They're good people. You don't need to worry about them. And he really fought for us. And we had the conference. But we had 50 protesters out front, and it was the people who were protesting us were the Muslim community and the gay community. And so they had placards with our names on it. They were, walking about 50 of them all day. At the end of the conference, we invited the leaders of that to come in and talk to us. And we said, tell us what's on your mind and why you're opposing us. And the one guy who spread the lies about me was part of that group. And so they came in, and we had one of the Harvard professors who actually attended the all-day meeting sit in on the meeting. And we said, what's on your mind? And so this one guy starts at me, and he says, you did this, you did this legislation in Uganda and so forth. And I said, would you like to know the truth about that? And I said, I was in Uganda before that legislation ever happened, and I would not support that legislation. He said, really? I said, yeah. Well, I've wrongfully judged you. I said, yeah, you have. And would you like me to do a retraction in the Harvard paper? I said, that would be wonderful. And so they started telling us other things, and we sat there quietly. We didn't argue with them, and we just listened. And but by the end of the conversation, we didn't necessarily agree with a lot of things they said, but we also didn't argue with them. We just kind of shared from our perspective. And we did it in such a way that they became open to us. And in fact, we ended up spending the evening with many of them. And it was a tremendous lesson on what is required to build bridges for people that are unlike us and have differing views than us. It's an important thing that we all need to know that, people are people and we need to respect them as with dignity. But you can have, proper barriers. That doesn't mean you have to be hateful to people. So anyway, that's a sideline. So one of the things this document we looked at said was this group as a whole generally leans toward liberal views. It says they lean more liberal compared to older generations, especially on social issues like LGBTQ rights and racial justice, climate change. Their liberal leanings are often driven by a strong sense of equity, inclusion, and environmental responsibility. I would say that certainly may be true for the general population, but young people who've been raised with a Christian value system would not probably lean that way. Do you agree with that?
It's tough to say. Honestly, I really haven't seen a large enough scope. I really can't give you an educated answer for
Mm-hmm.
that one, to be honest with you.
One of the
I,
things
Go
here is
ahead.
he places a high value on personal freedom and authenticity, which can sometimes conflict with both liberal and conservative ideologies, leading some to identify as politically independent or unaffiliated. Do you see this group being more independent?
I think there's a desire to be independent thinkers. I think there's, in general, across generations, just
But they're very social too.
yes, but they don't really want to just think like everyone else. There's a desire for some autonomy, and I think every generation since the beginning of time has had that. But I think it's especially true when you can learn whatever you want to learn and think whatever you want to think, and it's kind of celebrated in society. People look for that um, independence in their thought patterns, I would say.
And it's interesting that the fifth point on this is emerging conservative voices. Despite the broader liberal trends, there's a growing segment of conservative Gen Zers who are vocal about their beliefs, especially in areas like free speech, traditional family values, and limited government. So, key insights for engaging Gen Z with Christianity: focus on relational ministry, address social issues, leverage digital platforms, provide safe spaces for dialogue, and highlight purpose and hope. I think you and I would agree purpose and hope would have to be one of the biggies there to help them have a sense of value.
Yeah, for sure. I think hope is big. Hope
Everybody
is,
has to have a purpose for living.
yeah.
So, so you've been doing some things with uh, this generation. What are some things that you feel like God's called you to do with um, in terms of speaking to the generation?
I think I think the Lord's kind of given me a little bit of a passion for teaching people and training people, um, especially just given the makeup of the thought patterns of my generation. I think one of the things we need most is objective truth that is more consistent than our feelings that we can go back to and build our lives on. And so helping people understand the beauty of the gospel of Christ is really something that I love to do. And I think God has equipped me to do. And so that's why I do a lot of the things that I do in ministry and even in just some business things, trying to build some leaders that are based biblically. I think I think we need to go back to what God says about who we are and how we should operate with each other, because His ways are higher than ours. And so, in a society that's rejecting any kind of authority, I think it's good to be able to articulate why His ways are better than our ways and why we are so desperate for a Savior named Jesus. And so, I love to do that. I think it's something that the Lord's given me a passion and a burden and a gift for.
Awesome. If they wanted to get in touch with you to have you maybe help them with a group they're serving, how would they get in touch with you?
Probably either email, phone, or Instagram. That's probably the best.
Give out your phone and email.
My phone number is 678-699-4923. Really pretty responsive with text or calls. 678-699-4923 again. And then my email is my name in all lowercase, daxisbell16 at gmail.com. And
Okay.
you spell it DAXISBELL 16 at Gmail.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dax, it's been good to have you here and just get a perspective on this generation that so many of us have. I think my generation, look through a lens that may not be totally accurate, and we need to help this generation as the next generation to take leadership in our country. So it's very important. So thanks for being with us.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. It's been exciting.